Alright, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. I've got a couple of interesting stories for you guys today. The first story that I've got for you guys today, Andrew Jacked, his pro debut is confirmed. Now, he confirmed his pro debut on a recent episode of JTV where they were kind of interviewing him, asking what his upcoming competition plans are. And a lot of people have noticed that in some of the recent updates that we've seen of Andrew Jacked, he looks like he's in incredibly good shape. And I know that a lot of the updates he was posting, he was like weighing in the 290s. And he looks really big or really conditioned for a guy that big. And we found out why on this episode of JTV. He said that his pro debut will be at this upcoming Texas Pro in just a few weeks. So, like I said in the last video, we've got a lot of very interesting storylines in bodybuilding, a lot of newcomers, a lot of guys that will be hopefully making their pro debut. You got Andrew Jacked now, along with Michael Krizo. You've got Good Vito trying to get into the pro ranks. Krizo, I think, will be a lot faster. But I think we got some interesting storylines of guys that could really be disruptors and guys that kind of, in a way, came out of nowhere and could, I think, have a pretty meteoric rise in the pro ranks. And we haven't really seen this since Nick Walker. Nick Walker was the last guy to really do this. We were all excited for him to get his pro card. We were all excited to see his pro debut at the Chicago Pro that year. And then he had a pretty fast rise through the ranks to becoming Arnold Classic champion, New York Pro champion, top 6 Olympian. And we haven't really had a story like that since then, since Nick Walker. But this year, I think that possibility is here. I mean, we got this, we got these 3 guys right off the bat. And I think you could even throw Horse MD into that mix. Now that we know he's doing open, I think he could be a guy that could surprise a lot of people and have a quick rise. But, Good Vito, Michael Krizo, Andrew Jacked, I think all of these guys are guys with potential to, once they compete as pros, do very well. And speaking of Michael Krizo, we mentioned in yesterday's video that Michael Krizo was in the United States. He was in New York, and it was pretty cool to see him at Bev's gym. He was there with Big Steve Weinberger. He took a picture with him. He was training at Bev's gym. So it looks like he's kind of rubbing elbows with the guys that are at the top of the IFBB, the top of the NPC. And it's pretty cool to see this transition for him because he was such a big star in the Elite Pro. And again, very complicated, this split between the 2 IFBBs. There's an IFBB Elite Pro and the IFBB Pro League. Again, for those of you guys that might not know, is the one with the Olympia. It's the one here. It's the one with the NPC is basically the feeder system. It's the one with all the pros that we mostly talk about on this channel. So for him to make such a public spectacle of this transition and really lean into it, I mean, going to Bev's gym, meeting with Steve Weinberger, announcing that he was going to be doing this Prague Pro qualifier. And again, I have a really strong suspicion that he's going to win that pro qualifier and compete in the Prague Pro right after that. And realistically, you look at Michael Krizo and you can see he is a top caliber bodybuilder. He is a pro caliber bodybuilder. Realistically, who in the amateur ranks is going to beat him at that pro qualifier? I have a very hard time believing he's not going to turn pro immediately. And then if you go even beyond that, the Prague Pro, I can't imagine it's going to be a crazy stacked lineup. A lot of the biggest names right now are already qualified for the Olympia. I don't think we're going to see really any super heavy hitters at that show. And Michael Krizo is a heavy hitter from the IFBB Elite Pro, and he's probably going to be going against guys that are like B or C tier IFBB Pro League pros at this Prague Pro. So I think he's going to have a good shot at potentially winning that, which would mean he qualifies for the Olympia, which would perfectly line up a storyline of how would Michael Krizo do at the Olympia once he's qualified. I think it's a fun thing to talk about, and I think there's a real chance, a very real chance, that he would not only be top 10 at the Olympia, that he could crack the top 6, and I think people would be surprised by what he's able to do once he gets there. And all those gears are moving, that everything's in motion for him to do that. And I think it could really be that quick. Turn pro, compete as a pro that same weekend, qualify for the Olympia that same weekend, and now we've got IFBB Pro Michael Krizo Olympia qualified that quickly. But let me know what you guys think about that commentary in the comments down below. Do you think Michael's going to turn pro, qualify, win the pro show, go to the Olympia? And if he does go to the Olympia, how do you think he's going to do? And what do you think about the fact that he's now meeting with Weinberger, training at Bev's gym? I think it's kind of a big step. Now, next up in the news, Iain Valliere answers the question, will he compete again before the Olympia like he's done in the past? So after he qualified for last year's Olympia, he kept competing. Kept winning shows, collecting those checks. He answered a comment on his latest post on Instagram. They said, congratulations on your win. Any chance you will do Texas? And he actually says no, he's done until the Olympia. So I kind of thought there was a chance he would jump in that Chicago Pro lineup this weekend because based on based on that scorecard or the competitor list that we saw, it's not going to be a super deep lineup. And dare I say, it might have been kind of an easy win for Iain had he jumped in. And like last year, he did the Texas Pro, and in a way, kind of took that qualification from Steve Kuklo, who would have won that show had Iain not been there. And now that we know that Iain's not competing in that show or any other show before the Olympia, I think that makes it that would make it even more tempting for Antoine Vaillant to jump in that Chicago Pro lineup and have a shot at winning and qualifying for the Olympia and adding yet another name to that Olympia qualified competitor list. But I do think that Iain saying he's not going to continue competing in these shows is a noteworthy story, because realistically, we've seen a lot of the same guys do a lot of these shows in this kind of this portion of the competitive season. They keep doing the show after show after show. It's a lot of the same names. And realistically, in this group of guys that are prepping and in competitive shape, Iain is basically the best bodybuilder that's actively competing in these pro circuit shows. So if he were to do any of these upcoming shows, right now, he's like the best bodybuilder that would compete, and he has the strongest chance of winning. So I think a lot of bodybuilders are probably breathing a sigh of relief right now, learning that he's not doing these upcoming shows, because I think he would stand a very real chance at winning most of them if he did them. The Texas Pro, Tampa's coming up, Chicago's this weekend. In any of those lineups, Iain is one of, if not the most dangerous bodybuilder had he chose to do them. So I think a lot of people are relieved right now by this comment. Now, next up in the news, a recent physique update from Hunter Labrada working on his posing. I think this was noteworthy because he looks like he's certainly put on a pretty significant amount of size. Hunter, one of the things that I feel like people really knew Hunter for was like the mass with class thing. He's a big bodybuilder, but his posing is really good. His waist is pretty small, and he's kind of got those Labrada genetics, and he wasn't really known for being as much of a mass monster as Nick Walker was. Him and Nick were the guys that were head to head at the last Olympia, so it looks like he's putting on a little bit of size to try to keep up with Nick Walker and maybe try a little bit harder to outmuscle him this year. Even though he beat Nick last year at the Olympia 4th and 5th, Hunter obviously was the one that took 4th, but this year it looks like he's bulking up a little bit. And I'll even put a side-by-side here, the latest side chest from both Nick and Hunter. For comparison purposes, Hunter looks pretty big even next to this update from Nick, and Nick is one of the freakiest bodybuilders I think we've seen in a while from a mass monster standpoint. At such a young age, and him and Hunter being so close in age, for Nick to be as muscular as he is, it's a pretty good comparison. I honestly think right now in the pro ranks that Nick is the freakiest bodybuilder in the IFBB. For his size, for his height, pound for pound, he's got a ridiculous amount of muscle. And the final story that I have for you guys today. The Iranian Hulk supposedly will be fighting again, or scheduled another fight. We know that he was supposed to fight Martin Ford, but that fight fell through because the Iranian Hulk backed out. So who knows if this fight will even happen. But in Dubai, apparently July 31st, he's supposed to fight some guy named Kazka Titan. And, you know, the reason why a lot of people said he backed out from the Martin Ford fight was largely due to the fact that once you see him in the ring with his shirt off, the game's going to be over. The jig's going to be up. People are going to realize that he photoshopped all his pictures, and that the whole image that he's portrayed is completely fake. So I have a strong feeling that this fight isn't going to happen either, but I think it'll be interesting if it does, so I wanted to include this in the video as well, just in case there is an off chance that it does happen, because that's less than 2 weeks away. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Please make sure you give the video a like, a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel if you have not subscribed yet already. As always, I love you guys. Appreciate you guys. Nick Strength and Power, signing out.